Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video we're going on an expedition to New Jersey, you know? Oh! And so on and so forth. This is the tale of a family business, well, more than one, in famous Asbury Park, and the story of two houses about 20 minutes apart, and what happened over the course of about 10 hours. This story, I know it's a stereotype, but it really is straight out of The Sopranos. And it's still going on to this day. Yeah, it's one of those. But there's more than enough to dig into, you know, in this old one. So let's see what we can do. So we're going to jump around a little bit over the course of about 9-10 hours back in 2018, but let's set the scene. First of all, the scene being a township called Colts Neck. Why is it called Colts Neck? Something to do with chopping off horses' heads? I don't know. Let your imagination run wild. Back to reality for now though. Colts Neck, Monmouth County, central New Jersey. It's pretty sweet, and they really love horses there, so I guess I kind of answered my own question. Fun fact, Springsteen, he lives there, and he's a big old horse ranch, so there you go. It's very affluent, a lot of small businesses, no major chains, none of that shite. You got ranches, and it's still less than an hour to New York City, so it really has it all. Back in 2018, it had a house, right located at 15 Willowbrook Road. Don't anymore. When I say house, by the way, I mean big F-off mansion. Today, you can purchase the 10 acres it stood on for $1 million. 3 years ago, it was owned by the Caneiros. On the 20th of November 2018, at about 12:30 in the PM, a 911 call was made to the Monmouth County Emergency Services.
Fire.
Where?
Willowbrook Lane, Willowbrook Road.
What is on fire?
The house. And there is a smoke's coming out, and there's a person laying down.
Where are they laying down?
On the property.
Can you get over
in
to
front
them?
of the house.
All right, get over
yes,
to
I'm coming over.
Okay.
Oh, my God, there's blood here. It's a corpse.
It's what?
It's dead.
What's dead?
Somebody is dead here.
Firefighters raced over, and on the lawn in front of the home, they found a body. Just behind, the mansion was completely engulfed in flames. The fire would take hours to be put out, and the house would be completely destroyed. Inside the house were 3 more bodies, eventually identified as the deceased Keith Caneiro, 50, his wife Jennifer, 45, and their 2 kids, Jesse, 11, and Sophia, 8 years old. So nothing here was natural, but I guess I didn't really need to say that. And things like this don't just happen, in quite cozy Colts Neck. Though, what was even more bizarre than the fact that this happened was what happened 7 hours earlier, 20 minutes away. At 27 Tilton Drive, Ocean Township. Located there was also a lovely house, not quite as affluent as Colts Neck, but very nice all the same. And at that house lived another Caneiro, Keith's older brother Paul. At about 5 a.m, again on the 20th of November 2018, a 911 call was also made from there, saying their house was on fire. The Caneiros had some bad luck that day. Tell you that for free.
What's on fire?
I have no idea. Our alarm just went off and my whole house is filled with smoke. Everyone's outside.
Is everyone out of the house?
Yes. Okay.
We'll get everybody over here. Okay.
I have a turtle inside too.
Don't go back in for it, unfortunately. We're going to get everybody over there, okay?
Paul's fire was a lot less scary, trading a bloody body on the lawn for a turtle. So who were the Caneiros? And what happened? The Caneiros were born and raised in Brooklyn. Paul Caneiro the oldest, Keith 1 year younger, and there was a third brother, Corey, 7 years younger than Paul. Paul and Keith were extremely close growing up in Brooklyn and later Staten Island. They would always look out for each other. They would both end up marrying women from Staten Island. Keith would be Paul's best man, and sure, eventually they would live only 20 minutes apart from each other and be co-owners of a tech company, Square One, and a pest control company, EcoStar Pest Management, both operated out of the same building in Asbury Park. Keith was probably the more successful one and the more driven one out of the two. In high school, he worked as a janitor at a computer store, and from there he would be around computers his entire life. He started a tech consulting company in the 90s, which would later become Square One, even being written about in the Asbury Park Press when he went by Keith Martin. That was his middle name. Sure, Keith's first hire? His older brother, Paul. The company they ran together, it was very, very successful. Eventually they decided to purchase a pest control business. Gotta diversify. Hey, we use a mouse. Why not kill them? So Paul took over that, Keith stayed in tech. The brothers were doing grand. All three of them lived in Jersey, and they seemed to be a success story. Things, however, changed in 2012. Paul, he'd kind of always been overshadowed a little bit by his younger, more ambitious, more successful brother. Keith had started multiple companies, had a real estate license, had just received a master's from Columbia University. Though, Paul, he was doing fine just the same. And he was seriously injured in a car accident. He would end up in constant pain, need a shitload of surgeries, and he would have a limp and constant back pain the rest of his life. No bueno. It was bad, and things wouldn't ever be the same again. Paul would be very frustrated due to this. It seemed to cause contention at home. He would move out of the Ocean Township home he shared with his wife and 2 daughters for a time. But recently, and when I say recently, I mean 2018, he moved back in with them, but they didn't share beds. And Keith had also recently been talking about maybe ending their business partnership. Now, employees at both companies would say they were doing well. It's not like either one was, going down to jacks. But Keith, it seemed he wanted to end things and move on, do something else. And Keith was hoping to end up working at one of the bigger tech companies. And then, come November 2018, it seemed like someone wanted to end them both. When firefighters arrived on the 20th of November to Keith's house in Colts Neck, he was found on the lawn. He had been shot once in the lower back and 4 times in the head. Multiple shell casings were found beside him with the stamp GFL 109X19. The firefighters then entered the home and found Jesse on the floor of the kitchen. He had been stabbed. Sophia, the youngest, was found on the landing. She too stabbed. What's really horrific actually about the 2 kids was that when the autopsies were done, a contributing cause of death for them both was smoke inhalation. So they were alive when Jennifer was found on the stairs leading to the basement. She'd been shot in the head and stabbed multiple times. The police then learned something interesting as the investigation began. That about 9 hours before they arrived, before the fire was reported, at about 3 a.m, someone had called 911.
No, you're not allowed to hunt anywhere in the middle of the night. Are you hearing gunshots?
I heard gunshots, yeah. I was in bed. Clearly I heard dum, and then boom. Just clearly gunshot.
This person lived 3.5 miles from Keith's home, and they called because they had heard 5 gunshots. Keith had been shot 5 times. This was at approximately 3:33, of course, a.m. Very wee hours. So the police arrived that very cold early morning, but they couldn't find the source of the gunshots. And this person who reported the shots wasn't the only one. Another neighbor said they heard them too, 4 to 5 shots, specifically at 3:10 a.m. So whatever happened to Keith Caneiro and his family, it looked like someone shot him to death directly right outside his house at about 3 a.m, then went inside, shot his wife Jennifer, and then stabbed her, and then went after an 11-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl with a knife. Sick shit.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chris Gramiccioni. I'm the Monmouth County prosecutor. I'm sad to report that we've had an incident here that remains under investigation.
Then the fire was started. It wouldn't be reported though for another 9 hours, by which time the whole house was consumed. So what's weird is that 2 hours after, we can assume, Keith and his family were murdered at 3 a.m. 2 hours after that, at 5 a.m, 20 minutes away, Paul's house was set on fire with him and his wife and his 2 kids inside. So this was also learned by the investigators, quite a coincidence, and then they were contacted by the youngest Caneiro brother, Corey Caneiro. Well, actually, they were contacted by Corey's wife. They had heard about the fires, they called the police and told them that they were moving and taking their kids to Pennsylvania. Your 2 older brothers both had their houses set on fire, might not be a good idea. They went to the grandparents in Pennsylvania. Corey would speak to the police and he told them something interesting. The day before the fires, right, on the 19th of November at about 7 p.m, Keith forwarded an email to his younger brother, Corey. It seemed like he just wanted to keep his younger brother in the loop. And the email he forwarded to Corey was one he had sent to 2 of his business associates. In it, Keith wrote that he would not be paying another single penny to Paul Caneiro's wife until funds that were missing from the businesses were accounted for. Keith also wrote that he wanted to sell the businesses. As I said, he was hoping to move on, and he was getting very frustrated with Paul and the amount of company money Paul was spending. Now, we will get to Paul Caneiro's house fire and the, suspicious circumstances surrounding that. But first of all, let me tell you a little bit about the businesses the Caneiros were running. Keith and Paul, they co-owned Square One. Keith was the majority, Paul the minority owner. But the pest control company, they owned that 50-50. But Paul had been in a car accident. He was kind of screwed. So what they did was Paul's salary was paid to his wife, to Paul's wife. Therefore, Paul could collect disability while he was still working, which is very illegal. And recently, Keith and Paul had been arguing more and more about money. 2 hours after gunshots were heard in Colts Neck, emergency services arrived on Tilton Drive. There was smoke and a small fire in the rear of the house. The 4 members of Paul's family were there, himself, wife, and 2 grown daughters. They were sitting in a car, a Porsche Cayenne, parked outside. No injuries reported, and the house, it would be fine. On the driveway of Paul's house was a red gasoline can, right beside another Porsche which had marks on it, like, gasoline, spotting marks, stains. In a shed at the back of the house, well, there were 3 more gas cans, with a space for a 4th, the one on the driveway. So, things are already looking, shite. But luckily, we might be able to solve this one without Scooby-Doo, because Paul, he had surveillance cameras all around his house. So we can just see what really happened, right? Paul said, yep, review the footage, but ooh, I might have turned off the recorder earlier on, because, they're slowing down my Wi-Fi. Now, the affidavit said the cameras were hardwired, so they wouldn't use the internet. Paul must have forgot, and that's why he turned them off. The footage showed that at about 1:30 a.m. on the 20th of November, Paul walked into the garage to the behaviour system, turned it off, so the system stopped recording. So the fire investigators quickly determined there was arson done by a dumbass. The police spoke to Paul's wife. She said she just woke up in the middle of the night to the smoke alarm. Her and Paul had been sleeping in different beds. Remember, they weren't on the best of terms lately. She presumed all the footage, was still recording. She had no idea Paul had turned anything off. So when the alarm went off, the family left the home. Paul took a Porsche out of the garage and they all got in, waiting for the fire trucks. So obvious what happened, but the investigators were looking around. Now, Paul's CCTV, he had turned it off. Oh no. But a neighbour hadn't turned their CCTV off that night. In fact, it showed a white SUV, believed to be a Porsche, and Paul owned 2 Porsche SUVs, driving toward Green Grove Road at 2:07 a.m. from the direction of Paul's home. Now, that road is the main one. It can take you anywhere, including Colts Neck. That SUV then came back, driving towards Paul's house at 4:08 a.m. The house behind Paul's also had CCTV, and determined that car came and went from exactly Paul's house. So, to sum up the timeline, at 2 o'clock, a car leaves Paul's house. At 3 o'clock, there are gunshots heard in Colts Neck. At 4 o'clock, the car comes back to Paul's house. At 5 o'clock, Paul's house, a fire starts, and then at 12 o'clock, the fire is discovered in Colts Neck. Canines alerted them to an accelerant found, around the scene of the fire. They got a search warrant. They searched one of the Porsches. Inside, they found parts of a 9mm handgun. They found a suppressor, and they found night vision, thermal vision attachment for a firearm. On the 23rd, they searched the house. Inside, they found a safe, multiple guns in there. Ammo found was Fiocchi, if I'm pronouncing that right, 9mm, with the head stamp GFL 10 9X19. Sound familiar? Beside the location where the fire had been started was a plastic container. Whoever started the fire clearly hoped the fire would destroy that container. No dice. Inside that container was bloody clothing. And then when that was taken for testing, the blood was determined to be 8-year-old Sophia Caneiro's.
Have worked tirelessly on these investigations over the past week, and I will give particular shout-outs to many of them as we go through this press conference. But we called this press conference for the purpose of announcing that additional charges have been filed against Paul Caneiro this morning, and he's been served with those charges while he's detained at the Monmouth County Correctional Institute here in Freehold. We have charged defendant Caneiro with 4 counts of murder, 1 count of aggravated arson, 1 count of possession of a firearm for an unlawful purpose, and 1 count of possession of a knife for an unlawful purpose. These charges that were filed this morning are in addition to the charge that was filed last week out of Ocean Township for the alleged aggravated arson of the defendant's own home. And by filing these charges, the state alleges that the defendant murdered his brother, Keith Caneiro, and Keith's entire family, his 2 children, Sophia and Jesse, and his wife, Jennifer, during the early morning hours of Tuesday, November 20th. Specifically, we allege that the defendant repeatedly shot and killed his brother while he was outside of the side of his home, and then moved to murder the rest of the family inside the home. We allege he started the fire in the early morning hours of Tuesday, November 20th, after he allegedly murdered the Keith Caneiro and his family. Now, it's a fair point about the fire not being reported at 12:38. Based on what we know from cause of origin of that fire, it was started in the basement. It continued to smolder until when there was entry made into the home, a great deal of oxygen coming into the home effectively fed that fire. So it wasn't reported until 12:38, and what we believe caused the fire to catch on from there is likely the feeding of oxygen as the house was entered into. Now, understandably, many have questioned and wondered about a motive to these alleged crimes. Based on our investigation to date, we believe that the defendant's motive was financial in nature, stemming from his and the victim's joint business ventures that they owned and operated out of Asbury Park. As a result, we have also launched a financial investigation into the business and financial dealings of the defendant. The fire at his home served 2 purposes. One was to destroy evidence that he retained and brought back from the Colts Neck crime scene, and the other was to create some type of a ruse or an appearance that his larger or overall family was somehow targeted. This, we work for the state and for the government without passion or prejudice, but this one is the most brutal case that I've seen in my experience here.
Paul was arrested and charged with 4 counts of murder, 1 count of aggravated arson, and 2 other lesser weapons charges.
this point, we acknowledge that my client has been served in regards to these particular complaints and ask that a not guilty plea be entered in regards to all of these complaints.
State your name for the record and spell your last name.
Paul Caneiro, Caneiro.
All right. Batshit.
We represent Paul Caneiro. You understand that Mr. Caneiro has been charged with 4 counts of murder, associated charges of arson and weapons possession. Mr. Caneiro maintains his innocence of the charges. He has indicated that he would never engage in conduct which would cause harm to his brother or his brother's family. And he intends to challenge the evidence that has been gathered by the prosecutor's office in this case. And certainly, in his view, he believes that when the case is finally resolved, that he'll be vindicated.
I'd like to add that Paul Caneiro loved his brother, loved his sister-in-law like a sister, loved those children. He would never do anything to harm them. There's no reason on this earth for him to have harmed them.
You know, employees saw Paul the day before all this happened on the 19th of November, and they said he was acting fine. Nothing weird about him. He was normal. Buried in his iPad all day. I'm gonna blue ball you here now, though, because since then, nothing really else has come out about this case. He was supposed to be going on trial this year being 2021. Doesn't look like it, though. Paul was also charged with, getting disability while working, and that could be 10 years alone if convicted. Also, Keith's wife, Jennifer, her father filed a wrongful death suit against Paul. In it, he alleged that Paul, in addition to whatever naughty business stuff he may have been up to, he had also stolen $90,000 from Keith and Jennifer. Keith and his wife had discovered, about 6 months before their deaths, that Paul was taking money from college funds set up for their 2 children, Jesse and Sophia. Paul was taking it and putting it into funds for his own children. Total of 90 grand. So perhaps Paul turned off the DVR, drove from his house to his brother's house, killed them all, started a fire, came home, set his own house on fire, and did all that. And then, the idea of starting the fire in his own house was to make it look like he was a victim too. There was someone else out to get him. He pled not guilty, so I guess he's going for that. He did a really shit job, though, of setting his own house on fire if you wanted to make it look like someone else had done it. There was a gas can from his shed right in the driveway. And he did this all due to some financial shit with, his one-time closest friend, his brother, thinking that he could make it look like, I don't know, the mafia or someone was after him. Tony Soprano or something. Now it makes sense why Keith was the more successful one, because Paul is clearly a gobshite. Let's see what he says at trial. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with me, watching this old video. Here, go on. I'll see you as always. Real soon in the next old video. Until then, please take care of yourselves. Because I love you. Mike out.